Hi, I'm Patrick Veroneau, and I'm a results leader.
You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
You are listening to the only show on the internet dedicated to results. Yeah. Welcome to ResultsLeader.fm. So stoked that you're here. If you're new, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Glad you're here. And today's guest is going to be a good one. Today, Mr. Patrick Veroneau joins us, TEDx speaker, best-selling author. Not only that, but really deeply ingrained in the psychology of success. Let's jump in. Patrick, welcome to the show. Are you ready to rock this thing?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think you're more ready than me today. You got this, buddy. So let's give our listeners a quick win. What book have you given most as a gift?
You know, one of the books that I love is a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. It's by a guy named Chet Holmes. And that's probably one of the books in business that I've given away the most because, or at least referenced, because he's no longer with us. He passed away a number of years ago, but the book is not just about selling. It has so much more to it in terms of just how you show up. One of the terms that he uses is called pig-headed discipline. And I love that. Pig-headed discipline. That's the difference. So the ultimate sales machine.
Describe pig-headed discipline.
So pig-headed discipline literally is just the grind. It's that you don't have excuses for why things aren't going to happen for you. You just find a way to sort of continue to work through and muscle through the challenges. We all have them, regardless of what we do, the best of intentions. But really, I think it's those people that just continue to find ways to grind. That pig-headed discipline are the ones that succeed. I will often talk about resources and resourcefulness. And I think we all lack resources, right? Either I'm not tall enough, I don't have the right education, I don't have enough money, whatever your thing is. But one thing that we all have equal access to is resourcefulness. Nobody has any more or any less. It all depends on how people tap into it. And to me, that's sort of pig-headed discipline.
Reminds me of a friend that used to tell me that he was just too dumb to quit.
Yeah, I love it.
Kept showing up until it happened for him. I love it, man. So tell us a story of how an apparent failure set you up for later success.
Yeah. You know, I started my business in 2008. Which for many listeners might remember, that was not a great time to start a business during the recession in the US. It was an ugly time. I had just left an organization that had a buyout. I had about a year severance and I thought, you know what, I always wanted to go into coaching and sales training and I thought this is the time to do it. So 6 months into it, all of a sudden, all of my severance basically was wiped away because it was all in stock. So I had about 3 months of run rate. So I ended up going back into the industry. I was in the pharmaceutical industry. I went back in for a few years to try and get my feet back on the ground. And not long after that, I was sort of side hustling. I had a company that I put a proposal in for to do coaching and leadership development and team development for this whole hospital. It was over $100,000 and I got it. And I hired some other people to come in and then I panicked thinking, I'm not going to be able to replicate this. I stayed in the industry. I let other people do the work, but I didn't use that as a jump off point until a few years later. Then I had a boss that was so difficult for me that I finally quit. And what I learned in that period was that if I had just trusted in myself, the business would have shown up. I was starting with $100,000 plus account and I didn't trust enough in myself. So that was probably one of my biggest failures in some regard, is that I didn't trust myself enough to stick with it. Once I went back out again, I knew, like, don't question yourself. You got this. It's been that way ever since.
Powerful. What a great account to start with, too. People would kill for that.
It was almost too good, right? I had this, like, where they say the imposter syndrome. I was like, I can't do this. But I had all the pieces. I knew what needed to be done and I delivered for that account. And had I just sort of stuck with it, right, and not questioned, I can't replicate this, I would have been that much farther ahead.
What would you say is the most worthwhile investment that you have ever made?
Well, there are a couple of things. I would think first is the investment that I continue to make in myself. That has continued to be worthwhile, whether it's courses I take or books that I read, I think if you're not investing in yourself, leaders are learners constantly. The second thing from an investment standpoint is hiring out other people to do work that that's not my sort of zone of genius, I would say. So I have a podcast as well. In the beginning, I was doing all the pieces to it. It wasn't the best place for me to be doing that. My social media, I used to do all of it. That's not my zone of genius. The investment that I've made to get other people to do those things that they're much better at continues to pay dividends for me.
Yeah, man, reminds me of Dan Sullivan, Who Not How. We all want to roll up our sleeves and do the work, and it's harder to teach someone else. But man, when you learn how to delegate properly, it is life-changing. So let's think back. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Neuroplasticity would be it. I started reading about that a number of years ago, and I thought, boy, a lot of the stuff that I do, the industry I came from was all about science and research. And, habit formation, we hear about things like 10,000 hours and work by Eric Erickson that talked about that elite athletes or performers on average have spent, we hear the number 10,000 hours, but Eric Erickson actually, when you see some of his research, he says it really about 7,000 hours of deliberate practice. And to me, a lot of that has been tied into this concept of neuroplasticity that we start hearing a lot more about now, that the more we practice something, we create these circuits in our brains that create what's called automaticity. So that all of this work and grind that we're doing, if we just continue to keep doing it, we're building the circuits that build the habits that make the direction we're trying to go in much easier to get there long term. It's not overnight, but we know the science is there. And I think that's been one of the biggest things for me in terms of just realizing, the grind that I'm doing, I'm creating circuits. Habits are happening.
I heard you say deliberate practice, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about what deliberate practice is. I get it, but I've never had anybody say those words on the show. Can you tell us what you mean by deliberate practice?
So if you think about 7,000 hours, well, I could go out and practice for 7,000 hours of practice. But if I'm doing the wrong things, I'm still not going to end up in the right place. So deliberate practice is about understanding what are the things that need to be done that have to be focused on specifically to get me to where I need to go. That's the deliberate part of it. Like, I'm not just going out there, let's just say that it was, baseball, swinging a bat, or golf, swinging a golf club. I'm not just going to go out and take 100 whacks with a golf club. If I don't look at the positioning of my feet and where my hands are on the shaft of the club, that's deliberate practice, understanding all the components to it. And it's not just in sports, it's in other things or in any other thing that we do, we can create deliberate practice. I will say along those lines, one of the other books that I really enjoyed is a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it's by an author named Sean Covey. And one of the 4 disciplines he talks about is this idea of lead indicators versus lagging indicators. And we spend too much time focused on the lag indicators that we really don't control, the results. That if we just spend more time focused on the lead indicators, what are the things that I need to do that are in my control every day that I can do? So if it's, writing my book, well, I don't control the lagging indicator in some regard, but I do control the lead indicator, which is how many words am I going to write today? How many days am I going to write this week? When am I going to put the time in to do that and dedicate that? Those are lead indicators, all things that are well within my control. The book being published, I have less control over. Lead indicators, full control.
What would you say are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
That's a good one. I can't think of anything offhand that is specifically bad. I think one of the things that I find most frustrating is when people are sort of given permission to not be at their best, right? Almost as though they're a victim. It's somebody else's fault that you're in the position you're in. You don't have control over this. Because when it comes right down to it, we do have control. Maybe not on the outcome, but again, we have control on the input of this. On how I approach the situation, I have full control over it. And you can look, the same 2 people can experience a loss. One person can think it's devastating. This is the worst thing that could happen. The other person can look at this and say, this is an opportunity for me to change what I was doing now, or to finally make that jump that I've always wanted to make. And now that I don't have this safety net, I'm going to do it. It's the same experience. It's how we choose to approach the next step of that that makes all the difference. We hear so much right now about quiet quitting in organizations. I think there's a bigger challenge for people globally is that more people have quietly quit on themselves than on their organizations. Far more damaging.
Reminds me of a piece of art I saw the other day. It's not what happens, it's how you handle it. And that's where we have the choice.
Yeah.
We have that choice of what we're going to do with that information. We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a public service announcement. We're going to get right back into this show, but I wanted to ask you a question. If you have been listening to the show for any amount of time and you've picked up even one single tip, then I need your help. Get the word out. Tell people about resultsleader.fm. Share it on social media. Share it on your email. Share it anywhere. Hashtag resultsleaderfm. Now let's jump back into the interview. Let's talk about results. Why do results matter, Patrick?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to go back to that book by Sean Covey, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, because one of the other disciplines in that book is the scoreboard. And he talks about that as being vitally important. If you think of when you go to sporting events, what do people generally do? They're looking up at the scoreboard. What is the score of the game? Because that's how you gauge, maybe how your team is doing. Where are you? And results to me in our own personal lives, it's that same opportunity to look, where am I? If I've set this goal, to me, results are about looking and saying, is what I'm receiving, are the results that I'm getting, is it pushing me closer to where I want to go? Or maybe the result I'm getting is not the right result, and I've got to mix things up. I've got to get resourceful again. So that ties back into, I would say, even that first part of the pig-headed discipline. Somebody that's just sort of looking, saying, this one isn't working, something else will. Keep moving.
In the last 5 years, what new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the same belief that I have adopted in my own life and in the work that I do. It's around neuroplasticity. It's helping people recognize that you just got to stick with it. And it's changed a lot of the way that I coach too. I will do shorter sessions with individuals on a more frequent basis. And the reason being is if we wait 2 weeks before we get together, to me, I look at that like waiting 2 weeks before I go back to the gym. And if anybody has been in one of those situations where all of a sudden they take too much time off before they go back and they do the same exercises, what happens? All of a sudden the next day we're like, oh, I'm so sore. This took so much out of me. It's because we started to get out of shape again. Those muscles that we were building all along, we took too much time off. And I think neuroplasticity is the same way in regards to how we change our own habits or coach, that the more regular and short intervals I can meet with individuals, it keeps us on track. So that's how I've sort of changed really my own approach to when I'm doing workshops or one-on-one coaching, is to try and shorten and more duration.
I'm curious about the shortened and more consistent action. Does that also tie into the deliberate practice? Are you like doing reps on one particular thing? Like if it's a forehand, we're just working on forehands for the next week or whatever. Yeah. Is it something like that?
So it's interesting that you say that and I do it myself. If I were to pull up my calendar, what I will tell people to do is, or what I suggest at times is, for me on my calendar at 10:30 and at 3:30, I have those spots open and I will change those up to say, you know what, today or this week, I'm going to work on just listening, just my ability to listen to other people on the words specifically that they use. Or maybe I'm just going to work on listening with my eyes this week in terms of watching facial expressions and body language of somebody, right? I'm going to take a different component of how can I improve my skill as a listener. And I put it in my calendar, 10:30 and 3:30. And what that does for me is, when my alarm goes off at 10:30, all it says on there is listening, eyes. And what that does is it reminds me, okay, how am I doing, right? It's almost like I get an opportunity to reset. If I forgot that I was supposed to be doing that, it gives me now another opportunity to do that. And 3:30, again, at the end of the day or close to the end of the day, does the same thing for me, but it's keeping it in front of me, right? So it doesn't just go away when I'm like, oh, I'm distracted, I'm doing other things. It keeps it in front of me. And coaching is the same way, is that there's an accountability factor. If I meet with somebody at the beginning of the week and say, okay, what's the week look like for you? What are you going to be working on? And then we follow up at the end of the week to say, how did things go? And then maybe they're getting texts from me in the middle of the week, automatic, that are saying, just to check in, how are things going? That's an opportunity to sort of continuously go to the gym on a regular basis. We're working that muscle. We're creating automaticity as part of that neuroplastic building that we're doing.
I feel like I'm getting bionic over here, man. All right. Let's talk about you for a second. What area of your business would you like better results?
So as I talk out of both sides of my mouth here, right, I talk about the discipline. I know one of the things for me is that there are times where I get so focused on the new ideas, the new workshops that I want to put together, that I lose track of the lead indicators, of the things that I need to do on a regular basis to make sure that I am constantly out there making sure that I'm in places where I can deliver on what I'm doing. It's almost like I get so busy with clients that I have to pull back and realize I need to make time to make sure that I'm out there looking for new opportunities to help people.
What are some of those lead indicators? I mean, essentially, I would look at this as inputs and outputs. So what are the inputs you're not focusing on when you're out there actually delivering on your product? Because that's what you're doing, right? You're getting bogged down in delivery because you're helping people and forgetting about the front end. So what are some of those inputs?
So inputs would be reaching out to clients that I'm currently working with or have just previously finished up with to ask them, how have things gone? Who else do they know of that I might be able to reach out to, that I might be able to sort of provide the same services that I'm providing to them? What conferences are going on right now or are coming up that I should be on the lookout for? And then networking within my LinkedIn is what I use the most, to finding out, are there people that are linked into those conferences that I can reach out to them to make introductions for me?
I got this advice from a guy, and I'm going to share it with you because I like you. Put those things on your calendar, 10:30, 3:30. You got it.
Thank you. Right? Practice what you preach.
I'm learning. All right. What results are you most proud of?
I'm going to take a different approach to this. I'm most proud of my family. I've been married, so this is coming on 20 years for my wife and I. Now, 3 children. So my youngest is 16. I have a daughter, so that's Noah, who's 16. He's a junior. My daughter is a freshman in college. She's 18, Grace. My oldest son is 24, Josh. And if you notice, if I've been married for 20 years, I was divorced just when he was under a year old. It was a shock for me to go through that. And talking about pig-headed discipline and all these other things, I made a promise. My first email address, I don't tell this story much, but is called p2joshua@aol.com. If AOL even exists anymore, right? It's one of these. That was my first email address, and it was promised to Joshua. And he was my focus at that point. But I learned a lot going through that first divorce, that I knew that when I was going to get married again, this was going to look differently in terms of who I was as an individual, how I showed up. There's a model that I use in a lot of the work that I do in leadership around building better relationship bridges with people, and it's called cables. 6 behaviors. I look at those 6 behaviors on the relationship I have with my kids and with Cindy, my wife now, and I know that it's because of those 6 behaviors that the relationship that I have with each of my kids and with my wife is where it is today. I feel like the most fortunate person in the world because of the relationship that I have with them. And I know it's the result of those behaviors.
That's beautiful, man. Any parting thoughts you want to share with the results leaders who are listening to us right now?
Yeah, I would say live life on the edge. Live life on the edge. And if you know anything about me, you'll know that I love acronyms. So here's what living life on the edge is. The E in that is about expectation. You need to expect to get where you want to go, right? There's a belief in yourself, but that in and of itself is not going to do it, right? You can't just think happy thoughts and things are going to work out. So that's where the D of this comes in, and that's about discipline. You got to do the work, right? That pig-headed discipline, right? So you expect, and then you put in the discipline. But there's another part here, and the G in this model is about gratitude, right? It's about being grateful for where you are. And I think that's the part that gets us hung up at times, right? Is we might look to where other people are and we get distracted by them, right? We think, oh my God, they're so much more successful than I am. I could never be that good. It actually works against us. It derails us. expectation and gratitude is a dance that I can be expecting. I want more. I'm going to drive myself to achieve more, but I'm also grateful of where I am right now, right? And when we have that dance, we're moving ahead, but we're not haunted by where we're not achieving yet. The last part of this is around empathy. And to me, we've got to be able to care for other people, put ourselves in other people's shoes. I think this is about generosity too, when we think of empathy. How can we be there for other people? And when you live life on the edge, right, which is when we think of living life on the edge, that's like you're taking the most of everything you got. That to me is it. Expect, discipline, gratitude, and empathy. That is living life on the edge.
I dig it, man. I know our listeners are digging it too. So where can they get more from you, Patrick?
Yeah. So a couple places. One is you can go to my website, which is Emery Leadership Group, and that's EMERY, Emery Leadership Group. I have a book that's out called The Leadership Bridge. You can get that on Amazon. So it's The Leadership Bridge, and it's how to engage your employees and drive organizational excellence. I'm on Twitter, Coach Patrick V, at Coach Patrick V. So those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
You have a show, right? We're on a podcast. What's the name of the show?
Yeah. So the show is Learning from Leaders. That's my podcast. Learning from Leaders.
There we go. We have been hanging out with Mr. Patrick Veroneau. Thank you, sir, for hanging with us. Thank you, Results Leaders, for tuning in. Another episode is in the can. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard. We'll catch you on the next one.
This is the podcastfactory.com.